Welcome. Does anybody here speak Spanish? I speak Spanish. ¿Sí? ¿Hablas más español o hablas más inglés? More Spanish? Okay, perfect. In Spanish? Awesome. I guess in the middle. Entiendo los dos. Puedo hablar los dos, puedo leer los dos, pero soy más fluid in English. Or like they say, like, no sabo. I guess I'm like a sabo person. But at any point, si alguien tiene una pregunta sobre cualquier cosa, me pueden preguntar en español. Same thing. If you have any questions, if I say something in Spanish, let me know in English. I can definitely go back and forth in regards to Spanish. So, sí, no se preocupa. Cualquier cosa cuando usted baja, todavía te pueden dar tu descuento si quiere comprar unas cositas. Perfecto. Okay, no problem. We both. No, thank you for letting me know. No problem. So just want to introduce myself. My name is Jocelyn. I'm a Pro Studio key holder and makeup artist here at the Pro Studio. And then today I am doing one of the makeup trends that we've been seeing a lot on TikTok and Instagram. So I don't know if anybody has seen unrecognizable makeup on TikTok. So with unrecognizable makeup, can anybody tell me, like, what are the key things that you see when it comes to unrecognizable makeup? O unos tendencias que ves con la terma unrecognizable. Then, so I will say this is the thing when it comes to trends. Everybody tends to start seeing trends, but depending on who you see, everybody has their own take on it. But when you're looking at different takes of, let's say, a trend like unrecognizable makeup, you will see if you search it up that most of the time it has a little bit more of that full glam aspect. So sometimes they have a little bit more eyeshadow, sometimes they have more coverage on the skin, sometimes they have a little bit more sculpt. So those are sometimes the things when you're looking at different trends online, kind of seeing like a plethora of different point of view, but also seeing what are the main takes that you're seeing people do when it comes to a certain trend. So for example, with unrecognizable makeup, one of the things that I personally have seen is that it is a little bit more heavier on the coverage, so more full glam, more with the eyeshadow, more with the sculpt. So that is something that we're going to lean more into today. Vamos a hacer más alta cobertura maquillaje, algo glamuroso que también se puede poner en diferentes aspectos, como alguien de quinceañera, alguien de boda, alguien de fiesta. Entonces puedes usarlo para diferentes maneras. When it comes to trending topics in general, when it comes to social media makeup, you also want to take everything with like a grain of salt. So you never just want to see one thing and just automatically apply it and think that it's going to work for everybody. You kind of want to take into consideration, okay, if I'm going with something like unrecognizable makeup, I still want to take into consideration what am I doing in terms that's going to work with her face shape, with her skin tone, with her skin type. Because some, just like you mentioned before, you see more something that's like a glow from within. But what if my client's super oily? Something that's more glowy, algo muy luminoso, va a estar muy luminoso en alguien que tiene la piel grasosa y pues no va a durar mucho. So you kind of want to make sure that you're still customizing it and doing like a thorough consultation with your client before you jump in and just do, okay, we're going to go in with. So with my client today, her name is Izzy. So she is somebody that has a little bit more dryness to the skin, but still has a little bit of oil in certain areas. And she also has a little bit of like wanting more coverage in certain areas. So we're going to focus on spot concealing when it comes to complexion, and also something that's going to hold it a little bit longer and wear longer. But she also wants a little bit of glow to the skin. So with that being said, I'm going to enhance certain products from Make It Forever to make sure that it has those key factors for her to last long, but also get the outcome she needs. So with Izzy, we did already skin prep her with a little bit of the Amber Lace moisturizer. So this is one of my favorite moisturizers for skin prep. Again, really nice to have in the kit because it works well with any skin type, in my opinion. If somebody does lean a little bit more oily, I like to do a thin layer of this. If somebody is a little bit more on the drier side, I'll use a more thicker layer or even leave it on as a mask and let it sink into the skin. So we did a thin layer of this. And then I went with a little bit of Hydro Booster Primer in the specific areas where she does have a lot more dryness. So this I really just went in with a finger application and just massaged it into the skin in any areas that I feel like needed a little bit of extra boost and hydration. So from here, I'm going to start kind of placing a little bit of color correction in certain areas and letting it sit into the skin before I go into my complexion. So the first thing I'm going to go in is with our HD Skin color correctors. Has anybody played with our color correctors? So with our color correctors, they come in a couple different tones that work for somebody that's a little bit more fair to deeper than Izzy. So the shade that I'm going to be using today is going to be 0.3, but I also do have on hand 0.2. And the reason why I have both of these today is because I want to see that if this is running a little bit too deep, I can mix it a little bit up to 0.2, just enhance it. And if you don't have a lighter color corrector concealer, what you can do is you can also go in with a lighter concealer in general and kind of custom mix your own concealer shade as well. I just have these two. And so the reason why I'm going with this first is because I'm going to work on the eyes and then work on complexion. So while I'm doing these eyes, I want something like color correction and also a little bit of spot concealing I'm going to do to kind of sit on the skin and dry out. So that way when I go in with my foundation, it's not going to start mixing it. It's going to really stay in place. I'm going to go in with my little brush. This is a 226 brush. Right here, where she has that discoloration. And I'm going with a thin layer of this. If I'm going in with foundation, concealer, and I want to avoid any cakiness, I don't want to do a thick layer of corrector. So yo voy con un corrector y yo voy con mucha aplicación. Vas a ver que voy a necesitar más base, más corrector para cubrir este tono. Pues nada más un poquito la hora donde ella tiene esa oscuridad va a ser el mejor para su piel. And looking at the skin, I don't see that it's too dark, so I'm just going to keep on going with the same tone and going into the other. Don't have time to kind of wait for it to dry down before you go in with your complexion. What I like to do is apply a thin layer and then go with a very thin setting powder just on top of it, and then go with my complexion on top. And when I'm going with my complexion, if I'm going over here, I'll make sure that I'm pressing it up and not buffering or going up. Just because I don't want this to. But because I am jumping around, I'm okay with just placing this here and try to do this. So now that I have that, I'm going to now go into my other favorite concealer, and this is the Matte Velvet Concealer. So with this Matte Velvet Concealer, este concealer tiene más cobertura, es de contra el agua, so waterproof, 24-hour wear. This concealer, I even love to use as like a foundation sometimes on certain clients. Somebody that wants like very lightweight but wants a more matte finish. Sometimes I'll just skin prep the skin really moisturizable all over with this, and it spreads on beautifully and leaves a nice soft matte finish. So I'm gonna go in with the shade 325, and I'm just gonna start applying that in the areas where it usually has a little bit more discoloration. This by saying this is something that I love doing again, but I want to make sure that the skin is hydrated and moisturized when I'm going with this concealer in order to avoid it making look dry. Because sometimes if you go in with certain matte concealers that are full coverage, if you feel like you're starting to see it look dry or flaky, then the skin is not really hydrated as much as it could be. Or you may need to even do a little bit of exfoliation to the skin beforehand to avoid kind of like that dry, cakey look when you're going to. What I like to do is just kind of make sure that I blend it as well. Favorite things about these concealers too is that I can use it also to like prime the eyes. So I'm also going to use this to prime the eyes. If you're somebody that also loves to kind of do like that cut crease eye look or like to kind of help enhance the brow shape, I love also using these concealers to kind of. Again, going the thin layer because I want to avoid making that eye look really intense. First, obviously, left over on the brush. That's really where I'm just using it. I'm just gonna grab powder. It doesn't have to be eyeshadow. It doesn't be a loose powder. It can be a pressed powder. But I'm just gonna let you settle this into place. Formulate it and powder. I'm gonna jump into brows. So with brows, I will say I am very lucky today to have a model. Un modelo que tiene tan preciosos los eyebrows. Pues primera cosa que voy a hacer es nada más kind of brush it into its face and see the natural shape that she has. I would say brows is also something that is very personal when you're working with clients. So always double check with them if they do prefer to keep it more on the natural side or if they want more of like that really filled in brow. I would say with unrecognizable makeup because it does leave in that full glam tone, you can get away with filling in more of that full like filled in hard brow. But with her, like she has already that fullness. I don't want it to leave too cartoony. So we're gonna go in and kind of semi-fill in, but keep it in a little bit more of like that wispy, more like white brown hair from a sun. So I'm gonna go in with our Look Up Forever Aqua brow definer. Estos son contra el agua, so these are waterproof. And I'm going with a really thin applicator just to add a little bit more depth towards the outer half. She already has such a beautiful shape, so even just a really filling in already gives it that illusion of like, oh, your brows are there. Because I want to keep this more like that fluffiness. I'm really not going to touch too much of color, really, but more of like that build stuff to come more towards the end. And the shade that I'm using is the shade 40. So the shade 40 is not the darkest shade we carry. And the reason why I'm not going in with the shade 50, which is more deeper, even though she looks like she has really dark hair, is because then this is going to be the first thing that people see. Tú nunca quieres usar un tono que sea tan oscuro que casi mache el cabello, porque si no, this is going to be the first thing people notice, is going to be brows, especially since yours are super full. So I'm going with something that has a little bit more of a neutral tone, but shade lighter, so it doesn't feel like it's too much. Right here, getting closer, I'm just starting from like the beginning of her brow here. And I'm going even lighter with pressure. So dotting, going back with my little spoolie, making sure I'm brushing that out to get it that nice brow pressure. Client honestly feels like, no, like I don't want anything in my brow. You can always go with like a tinted brow gel and call it a day. But for this look, because I'm going a little bit heavier with the foundation and everything, I am just filling in just to make sure that the brows will also. Questions so far? Also, when you're doing brows, make sure that you're taking sometimes a couple steps away. Just to make sure that they're looking pretty symmetrical. Sometimes when we're too close, we really don't see their arm. Going in and going with the spoolie, bringing back, going back in, and then going back into the spoolie. Just because sometimes with certain creams, I would say ours are super creamy, which I love, but that makes it also easier sometimes to just go into the brow, get those kind of drawn in. So in order to make sure that the brow is still looking like it has some dimension and texture, and that's why I love to go with them and just create that like texture. And it has a spoolie on its own too. So if you're using it on yourself, this one does come with a spoolie. But I'm just using the spoolie on it. make sure that I'm kind of just shading brows a little bit. I'm the biggest fan of when the concealer, what you're using to clean up brows, is super, super bright. So that's why I like going in with something that I'm still working within the skin tone range here. So that way it looks like it's from within. It's not like I'm using a super bright concealer to create. Again, it also is very subtle. So if your eye does love that super bright concealer, I would say go 1 or 2 shades lighter to start off with, and then I'm going to be using more artist color pencils. Artist color pencils, I will say, are like the bread and butter of makeup forever, because these you can use for everything: eyes, lips, cheeks, editorial, soft glam. So I'm going to start with shading eyes with this color pencil. I also like to use our instant brush cleaner as a medium. So what this does is help kind of liquefy my products. So even though it says instant brush cleaner, this used to be our airbrush thinner. So this is safe to use. I'm not applying directly with my or just to liquefy my mix. Let me do a little bit onto my palette. And I only do like a dip in of my brush. I never go in full on saturation unless I'm going for more like of a watercolor effect. I'm just gonna grab my 220 brush, just a little bit more. A line on your brush. And don't worry about it being straight because I'm gonna blend it out. So this is gonna be the beginning of kind of creating kind of like this pseudo dark effect. And when you're doing this, make sure that you can also like work in the edges with the model. Don't be afraid to too much. Open your eyes, close your eyes, look left, look right, because it does help to see how this eye look is going to come out. Since you're not mistake. So when you first see this color, you can see how dark it looks there. But just from blending it out, you can see how light it's starting to look. About this pencil too is that, for example, let's say you don't have like a mixing medium on hand, you can still do this and it's still gonna blend out and be creamy. I like kind of either just rub it up on my hand as well. Or sometimes people like I've seen makeup artists do the school trick where they have their lighter to warm the pencil, and you can do that as well. Just because these pencils are water, so you really have to really blend down. I'm gonna do that one more time. But this time you see that I really didn't do anything. I'm gonna have more concentration of that. Because I want this to look really rich. Also, don't worry if it's getting too elongated towards the end or if it's going to downwards or it's going down because the great thing about us starting this is that you can just clean it up before you run this confession. And again, it's with the creating states, it's a lot easier to. And I'm also going kind of like a one brush motion. So I'm not going so much like this. I'm going one direction here and then towards the end just to keep this back tucked into the eye. I'm like pulling it in here, kind of creating like that crease shape. I'm using this as like my base for the shape. I love doing this because again, it's gonna be able to use less powder. And it makes it last long, especially if your client has more items. I'm gonna go in with my powder eyeshadow. So these are the Makeup Forever shadows. These are all depotted. Tú puedes hacer tu propia paleta. Entonces, si tú quieres hacer tu propia paleta, no tienes que comprar todos los tonos. Puede empezar unos 6 a 10. Pero estos son todos los tonos que tenemos disponibles. So, I personally, especially, like the smaller the island is, I like to work with smaller brushes. Even though Izzy has a beautiful eyeshadow where I can do a lot of work with, I still want to keep the colors kind of concentrated. So I'm not going to go with a big fluffy brush. Keep in mind sometimes when you use a big fluffy brush, what ends up happening is you get a lot more fallout everywhere. You lose control of that color and it goes all the way all over the eye. So keeping a smaller brush to me, you get a little bit more control. So I'm going to go in with this kind of shadow. And I'm just going to be placing it kind of on top of where I use that liner and bringing it up that curve side. So the color that I'm using is more on the warm tone side. But if I wanted to keep it strictly cool tone, I can do a little bit of this color as well. And then use that more cool tone shade. And then I'm just gonna literally turn my brush to the side whenever it's like over. I'm gonna start hugging. So you can have a little bit of that warm to the it to be really great to help avoid any of like the skipping, because I don't know if sometimes you have had experience with matte shadows where it starts looking like it's skipping or it's not even. So because I did like kind of the prep beforehand, it really helps avoid any unconfigured. I would say these shadows are really great with not having such a use a lot of shadows either. So that's another thing. I really didn't. This is the first shadow that I did. And there's not a lot. So that's gonna be better to pick up. Wait. Now that I have that, I'm gonna go in with my waterproof pencil. This is the number 2 ebony, and I'm gonna start typing. So I'm gonna look towards that direction. So pro tip, if you ever have any issue with text, if you ever have any issue with your models being sensitive to like eyeliner in their waterline, make them look in the opposite direction. So that way they're not looking directly into the pencil. Ya he tenido unas veces las clientes que yo estoy trabajando y no se dejan con los lápices. Entonces yo le digo, miro para el otro lado. I literally just pull their eye slightly down. I don't want to pull the eye, so you don't want to pull the eye either, but just slightly down so you can get that waterline quick. And then they can close their eyes. So if you feel like they are gonna water, Izzy did mention that she is a little bit more on a teary eyed side. I want to make sure that I'm also kind of helping her close her eyes while it can be closed to help avoid it being open too. Okay. So now I'm gonna have you look down. So for the trick for going into the waterline, you have them look down, pick up your eyelid, and I go slightly under. Now you have that. And I'm still keeping it in the dark browns. So I'm not really going with black, except when I go into like the lash line to create a little bit of like that smoky liner. I'm gonna use black later on. Even here, if you wanted to stop and just clean the edges, this is a look on itself. So this is a point where you can stop, and it's very soft, but it still has smooth definition. And also with this, I'm going all the way in, and I'm actually gonna go in later on to really get into that inner corner for this specific look. Because this is super creamy, it really does help glide in and do this as quickly as I can. And it's water. Now going into that inner corner. Kind of cat eye effect, not to the full extent, but just really getting it in there so I can kind of get that. If you wanted a more cat eye effect, what I like to do is add as much as I can, going with my brush really quickly and just flick it out because it's still in that moment where it doesn't set. You have the time to do it. But for example, let's say you're already set and it's not moving, you can go in with a little bit of this color pencil and flick it out too. But I'm just doing this. Where it's starting to like bleed in. This is the moment where you can clean it because we still haven't really cleaned it. And I'm not really going into the under eyes right now, just because since I didn't do complexion, if I were to do under eyes and then going in with concealer, it's gonna start mixing in. So I'm gonna do that towards the end once I finish complexion and under eye concealer to start smoking out the bottom. So at the moment, I'm gonna go now back into that water confinement in front. And also just bring it right here towards the top. This is waterproof, so this is gonna make sure that it has a good layer. Really staying having that. Going back with my brush. Just gonna slightly blend that edge. And because this is a texture that tends to dry down quicker, which I want it, you're gonna see more of that depth in that lash line really stay on, which I wanted to, because that's what's gonna help create that radiant effect. So now that I have that, I'm gonna now go in with my first color pencil in the shade black. Start creating a little bit more depth. But the key here is I try not to focus too much on this part too, because we're gonna do lashes. And when you add lashes, sometimes that is gonna cover up some of the work that you're doing. So don't stress it out. If you feel like you're gonna do lashes, do a little bit of the groundwork, put on the lashes, and then from there, once you see the lashes on, be like, okay, I can afford to extend it a little bit more, or okay, it looks fine the way. Because if you spend so much time creating a certain smoked out line, and then you put on lash, you're like, wait, it's gonna cover. So you spend a little time just like playing. It's not really good. So don't overthink it. And I feel like that's something that I come to learn as a makeup artist. Is sometimes you really don't need to. So I'm just really putting it towards the end, kind of like stopping towards the middle of that line. I'm gonna start kind of blending this. And I even sometimes turn my brush to the other side. This is like a super thin, like applicator side of the brush. And it really helps kind of create a even straighter look. And then with the tiniest pressure, I'm flicking upwards to create a tiny bit of that smoke. But not too much where I'm erasing that smoked out line. So you can kind of see it right there. And once I clean up the edge, you're gonna see it even more. But again, don't need to focus on it too much. But that black already helps it against it a lot. Again, as you can see, I'm not really working so much with so much UV shadow. If I were to do this with a black eyeshadow, it sometimes will create massive amounts of fallout where you will want to clean it up, and especially if you do it before. I mean, after concoction, you already know that taking off dark eyeshadow off of complexion can sometimes be time consuming. So this is a really great book to kind of look. I'm gonna just go in right here, so to just intensify. Once I have the lash on top of the lash line, then if I feel like I want to blend in the lashes, then I'll go in afterwards with this, just to make sure that everything's here. I'm gonna go ahead and apply these really wispy lashes. Does anybody have any questions so far? Nos preguntas sobre cualquier cosa. So with lashes, I will say make sure that you're also measuring them on your clients or your models to make sure that it benefits their shape. So the good thing about lashes is that you can definitely put them if you feel like they are too long. I like to do with lashes because they have kind of like that sticky texture onto them. In minutes. I like to kind of envision how they look before I commit to them with the lash. So if you turn, we see right here, if I were to go with this shape right here, I could go with it. I will say it's slightly already elongated towards the end. And it's kind of giving a little bit. I'm gonna go with something that just doesn't have so much focus. This is not be long. Okay. So I am gonna cut this. For the lashes, I'm gonna go ahead and do an application onto the strip. And then what I like to do is grab a disposable spoolie, and I'm just gonna grab a little bit of glue and just apply a little bit also onto the actual lash line to make sure they're more support. Sometimes with the lash band, it can become loose in certain areas. I think the inner corners where we have the most trouble with lashes. So I kind of like going through just to make sure that there is something there in case it's loose. You don't want to just automatically apply the lash because like sometimes just doesn't want to stick because it is still slightly wet. So you want to wait like a couple of minutes for it to get like really tacky. look right there. So these have a lot of wispiness to them too. So you can see, you can still see a little bit of that eye look. So for example, if I wanted to go, we did a more matte eye look, but I am going to use a little bit of shimmer towards the end so you can see how it looks with a little bit of shimmer. But if I were to do even shimmer or like colorful eyeshadows, this type of you can still see the color, which I love. Like this is a nice lemon, it's still kind of sweet. And I'm gonna let this dry down, and then I'm gonna use a little bit of my mascara and my curly just to make sure it really like sits into ours. I will say again, I was lucky to get a model that has naturally curly lashes, so I don't have to worry so much with it being so like looking like out of place. But if you do have a model that specifically has super straight lashes, I curl first. So you want to really curl those lashes. Go in with mascara. Sometimes even waterproof mascara is better for somebody that has super straight lashes to it really stay into place. Let it dry. Go in with the lashes and then do the same thing that I would do with her again. Let's look at the other lashes. You feel anything sticky? Usually I also like to cut off. If let's say her eye could take the full lash, I still like to just cut off the ends. Sometimes they have really pointy parts that can also make it feel pointy or ends. And then with your lashes, they also have sometimes like that glue residue on them. So I like to go in and just kind of take off a little bit of that glue residue. That glue residue sometimes also interferes with the lashes applying its best, or even looking like breaking the illusion that even though we know these are false lashes, but sometimes it really does look like fake lashes pressed on because it has a lot of that glue residue. I like to just make sure that I'm taking that. Especially if your model is taking like up close photos. Sometimes if you don't move the liner back to the lash line or leave that glue on there, you can see it in the photo. Alright guys, we're having precautions.
That's the thing I hate about this lash was there's so much glue on it.
This is why we charge what we charge. Sometimes we need to use a different lash in order to avoid it looking too heavy. Lashes are not cheap. You can do if you ever have that. Sometimes I still like to save those like one-off lashes because if I ever do like any creative makeup, you can still cut them into pieces and use them to like stack or custom make lashes. If you have Halloween, you can use them for like Halloween as well. So it's not a loss. Making sure that when you're doing this and you're keeping with students your protocols, as you can see, I'm not really going directly in. the blue, going to the eyelid. But the other reason why I cut it also is that at least when you're turning, you can still see a little bit of that lash line kind of still to out. Because if I were to go in with just the original lash line that we had before, it would have completely just came over here and it would loosen. That thing there. I'm gonna go in with a little bit of divine cunning, just to clean any of like the imperfections fall out. And then we'll just like a little. And I don't worry about too much about making this super sharp anyway, because I'm gonna go into this complexion. Even just that already creates it a little bit more shimmer. And if somebody wants to even increase it more, I can go into that with my artist colored pencil and that. For me, it's a lot easier and more recommendable to like do it in a more built up manner as opposed to going straight in with that black line. And then imagine taking the black on the complexion. That one. Now that we have that, I'm gonna now start complexion. So I'm gonna go in with the HD Skin Hydro Glow Foundation. With the HD Skin Hydro Glow Foundation, va a haber más luminoso en el piel, medio alto cobertura. This one also has HD skin properties, so it's gonna look nice and blurry on camera. And I'm going in with my 106 brush. So this is gonna be more smaller flat brush. And I'm gonna still work in between complexion. We're gonna start right here in the cheek area. And blend this. We are still technically in cooler weather. Let's use, because we are still in cooler weather, is use a little bit more on the drier side. I can get away with using this type of complexion and not worry too much about like the weather affecting it and thinking about us. But if we were in summer, humidity, the oils might start coming through a lot more. I'm gonna want to then maybe use HD Skin Foundation as opposed to Hydro Glow. And I know some people have sometimes trouble when it comes to complexion when they're using a brush like this. They're like, oh, look, how do you use it? Does it feel like it's streaky? What I like to do is going in a downward motion. But when I'm going in the downward motion, then I'm pressing it into the skin. When you're pressing it into the skin, one, you're helping it build that upward. But two, then you're erasing. And it's a real pressing it. I did like 2 pumps of Hydro Glow. I'm gonna see if I do like the using pumps. And where I went in with the matte velvet concealer at the beginning, still be mindful that here I'm not just gonna drag it down. I'm actually going to start pressing it up because I want to keep that coverage. And I will say with is you should have a little bit of peach fuzz. So again, that's another reason why you want to make sure when you're using this, you're going in that pressing motion and downwards because you don't want to lift that peach. When I work with clients, I'm doing more on the fair side. If they're in an event, make sure you're hitting their ears as well. They tend to sometimes have more redness in their ears. I don't really have to worry too much with Busy when it comes to that. But that's something that I do notice with our clients. Anybody that runs more tan to peak, I usually just have to worry about making sure everything is more fine. So if they have a little bit more brightness in the center, then I make sure to do a different type of technique where I'm just using a specific color towards the center and then using a deeper tone towards the outer, blending it together so that way it doesn't look like it's just one. It's lovely. Make sure that there's no streaks for this one. So now that I have my first initial layer done, I'm gonna now start concealing. So I'm gonna go in back with my concealers and do a little bit of a mix. That 3.5 with my Hyperflow. Go in with a more black blush. Kind of get some black here. So if you ever have any problem with like, oh, what color of concealer should I do? I usually just grab a brighter color and then mix it into the foundation, kind of custom make it. And then if you ever feel like, oh, this is a little too light, you can just go a little bit on top of the natural foundation. It's gonna help. Or if I feel like it's not really doing anything, boom, I have that lighter concealer. All the way up into that lash line or under eye, because I'm going to start letting it upwards. If I were to go in and start creating that lash line effect, you're going to see a lot of creasing. So this is just going to help avoid that crease on the and my favorite brushes, the 144. The Vertical Drill Check for Makeup Forever. I'm going to start pressing this and blend it into the skin. Because it's a clean brush, you really don't have to worry about over blending, working, getting cakey, because at the same time I'm kind of taking away any extra coverage, but I'm getting it into the natural creases that's being cut to avoid creasing. because this has more of a matte finish where I'm mixing into like a glowy texture, I'm now getting something that's more of like a satin finish. So especially if somebody has a little bit more texture in the center of their face, like pores, sometimes working with matte textures helps give that smooth illusion. But sometimes with matte textures, it can also look very heavy or feel cakey. So doing a little bit of like some mix just helps get like more of like an in between texture that is gonna help like give the best of both worlds. More matte, a little bit more coverage, but a little bit more comfortability. Lighter tone. It's also helped kind of give a little bit of that cheekbone highlight. Going to the cheekbone, not going all the way into that under eye, going into that fluffier blush. Now I'm blending it. A little bit of that natural under eye creasing. It was starting to crease a little bit more because Hydro Glow is such a creamy texture. But because I'm blending it in there, taking up the business, we're smoothing out a lot of that. A little bit of this right here in the center. Izzy has a little bit of a smaller forehead, so I don't want to make sure that I'm just doing a bunch of contour here and making it shorter. I want to make sure that I'm still having a little bit of symmetry, so I'm bringing a little bit of illumination here. So that way, once I warm up this area with a little bit of bronzer, it's not going to make it look smooth, swollish. Bringing a little bit of this down. Nose. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of contouring noses unless people request it. I think Lizzie has a beautiful nose, so I don't want to contour her nose. But if a person does request a nose contour, usually what I like to do is go in with a little bit of that bronzer or contour color right here. And then using that lighter concealer towards the end, just sharply the center and letting it sit there. When you let it sit there again, just like we did the concealer before, it lets it kind of dry down and give that really contoured effect that a lot of people are looking for. And then you set it. Or not. Okay. Now that I have that down, now I'm gonna go and start warming up the skin a tiny bit. Just because when you start to look at her body, you can see a lot of natural warmth on her shoulders. So I want to make sure that I also bring that into the front skin. So we're gonna jump back into our palettes. This is one of my favorite palettes. This is the Basic Essentials #3. I know that Makeup Forever is also really famous for these palettes. So these I always do fit. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab some more warm tone shade. I would say this is like a nice like neutral tone, not too warm. I mean, not too yellow, not too red. That's gonna be my initial start. But if I feel like it's a little too light, I can definitely add a little bit more depth to the makeup. But again, I'm gonna start off a little bit lighter and build my way. So I'm gonna grab this fluffy brush. This is the 152 brush. Again, another favorite brush of mine is using for blush or even foundation. I'm gonna really press that color into my brush. And then I like to take off the excess onto my hand. I'm gonna hold her hair back because she has dark hair. Está oscuro el cabello. Yo puedo agarrarlo así y blend it into the hair. If she was blonde, I would be even more careful because you really can't get away with doing that trick. It'll show up in the hair. Anybody with deep hair, you could definitely blend it into it. You can see I'm not really going on top like this, but more on the perimeter between here and here. And if you're working with models and talent, that's when you want to ask permission with whoever's doing hair. Hey, I'm doing this, can just to make sure that they know if there's a product. Or if they already add product, they know that. This one. And again, the key for making this look like skin is that it's not getting to the point where you can visibly see it because I'm going to reinforce everything that I did with powders to keep giving that illusion of coverage and also to set it into the lens. So you can still see a little bit of that come through, but it's not like a streak. Oh. The more fluffier your brushes, the more disperse and like the colors in the show. The more compact your brushes, the more you can see that color in the picture. With my brush I use for foundation, make sure everything is now that I have that, I'm gonna go into another favorite of mine. This is the Blush and Glow palette. Esta paleta es nada más de puro rubor y de brillo de highlight. This is amazing because you can use it for highlighting your lip and for blush. I even use it on the eye sometimes depending on the look, so you can definitely use it. The formula says that it is waterproof, but it is a cream at the end of the day. So make sure that if you are using this in specific areas where it run more oily, you want to make sure that you wash them. So I'm going to do a little bit of some mix of this too. These I will say, if you have our other palettes and you are interested in blush and glow, you're not going to see the same colors repeat. They are going to be colors. So I'm gonna go through one for each brush. I will say another trend that we've seen a lot is like blush blindness. I like to think people like Sabrina Carpenter who has like been really popular for like her really blushy cheeks. So sometimes now that I've been doing work lately, a lot of my younger clients they will request a lot more blush than before. They're not afraid of it. Also into my bronzer. So I never want to make it look like it's like one line, two line, three lines. I want to make sure that it kind of blends into each other. And then I'm just going to grab my concealer brush like before and kind of just marry those edges. No pressure. Out of that, I'm going to start setting it together. But definitely, so I'm going to start again going back and blending out a little bit of that natural eye crease that may happen. And I'm going in with the shade 2.2 Elite. Since I did color correction under the eyes of the day, I was able to go in with a little bit of a brighter color. We now go with a little bit of color correction and then go with a little bit of brighter color concealer. You might still see a little bit of shadow. So just make sure that's looking back to shades. And I'm doing loose powder first with a fluffy brush. And then I'm gonna go in with a powder puff after to set everything a little bit better in place. But you always want to make sure you're setting everything first with a loose. Now I'm just gonna go in with whatever's left over. This layer of powder. Very consistent. What I love about this powder is that it's more like big. It's not super. So again, if I wanted to stop here, I could with this powder and call it a day, but I'm gonna end up using a little bit of our other powders just to give it a little bit more of a our Glacier Skin Matte Touch powders. I love using these to add dimension. It's like these two colors right here. It's more golden, it's more red tone. My water pot. This is the lighter color. I'm just mushing it over there. Yes. Because I did the first initial layer of loose powder, it's not gonna just like kind of swing on, make it look too hard. It's just gonna reinforce longevity, memory. A little bit more of application just in the center, just so it doesn't look too big. I'm gonna go in with my artist color pencil. For me, I'm gonna start smoking up that under eye. So I'm literally just going in my brush. Smoking it. And then what I want to do afterwards, just to make sure that this like color stays in place, is then I'm just gonna use a little bit of that loose powder just to blend out these edges. So they kind of lock in there. Also helps if you like brought it too low or too dark, which is concept. Go into artist color pencil. They're one of my favorite colors. Probably for eyes, but for the skin. Brush with the double edge 248. Just to blend out. So this is also something that you really want to talk to whoever you do to see how they like to define it. Some people like the super defined print, some people don't like that, like lighter fonts, since they just want a very much color all over. For today, we are going to go to the more defined. And then with that same brush, like I'm using it to blend out the edge, but then I'm turning it onto its side. So I can get some of that shape better into going in is making sure I'm doing enough towards motion. Just to make sure that the lip is getting more plump, more fullness. If you ever feel like if anybody ever leaves requests, don't make my lips more full. Then you can go more towards a downward solution. I love going more into the upward solution. Now I'm going to in with Legendary Latte. This is our first color pencil extreme. This one is waterproof. There, kind of like in the center of the lip. And I'm going to top it off with the lip gloss. I'm just running the edges. It's like when you need back. But if I were to go in with that color on its own, it would definitely wash out her skin tone. At least when you go with that lip liner, it's gonna help you. I do want a little more definition, so I think I am gonna go in with the article or pencil extreme version of the same color. But I use at the beginning. This one does have a little bit more lightning, so sometimes what I'll even do if I wanted to be creating that dimension is I'll even go into the finish line. The nice full tone. The music to kind of like. Now we're gonna go in with the Super Boost Lip Glaze, so latte glaze. Our Super Boost lip glosses is one, they're super hydrating, and two, they're moisturizing but not tacky. So if you have customers that don't like that feel where it's like stringy, this is not. Brush that I use. And just make sure that I'm letting that. Oh, so this is easy. I just stop. From here, I'm just gonna add a little bit more blush. So now I'm going in from our blush palette. Same thing with your blush palette. You can customize and make your own blush combination. I'm working honestly. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, what blush do you use?" I'm like, "I use three. I'm not sure which one we use." One final thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back into my vertical pencil. I'm not even honestly extending the black all the way to the same length that I have in these. I'm just bringing it kind of halfway out. Shadow to come from the word that it reads, not from actual letters. Just want to reinforce a little bit of that stuff. From here, we're going to start now setting it. If anybody wants to look more dewy, use the regular listen big setting spray. This is going to go ahead and set the skin and give it like that nice subtle glow to the skin. It's not a dewy setting spray. So it's not going to give it too much glow, but it's going to give it, I hate this word, moist appearance. If somebody is a little bit more clear side or they want to look more black, you can then stick with the missing fix matte. So this is how it looks with the matte eyeshadow placement. Again, it works really well on the sunny that doesn't like too much sparkle and shine. You can keep it here, but for anybody that does love pop, you can go in with our Starlit powders. These are phenomenal because they really are so low maintenance. All you need to do is just if you want to wet the skin with setting spray and place it on top, you can. Personally, I'm actually in love with the matte look, so I'm gonna keep it matte today. But this is a really quick way that you can just pump it up with a little bit of that sparkle. And that's it. You don't have to do any like shimmer shadows. This was like, yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Then, thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Well, thank you for coming today. You guys also get 40% off any purchase. And then if you guys need anything, let us know. I'm going downstairs and then the team is downstairs as well. So, yeah. Yeah.